Buzzing. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I suspect a few people will be joining us here shortly as their calendar reminders are going off that they may have decided to attend today's webinar. So I'm sure they'll be kind of popping along here. Um, so welcome. My name is Jeremy Cherney, and I'm with Tobin Solutions, and we will be talking today about using SharePoint and OneDrive for documents. I think, gets it's a bit of a complex topic. A lot of you maybe are using traditional file servers or some other solution. Microsoft kind of does it their own way with SharePoint and OneDrive. And so we want to talk to you today about what that looks like. What are some of the key features, what it might look like to get started. Along the way, if you've got some questions, feel free to drop in something into the chat. At the end, we'll definitely be available for questions. And lastly, we're going to be sending out a survey in the end, and that would be great because that'll give you a copy of the slide deck, and that'll also give you the opportunity to provide your feedback to us, which is super valuable in how I present and the content and even when we have the webinars. So if this time of day doesn't work for you and you prefer a different day, you can speak your mind into the survey. So great. So that's me. I'm Jeremy. I'm the founder, CEO, and president of Tobin Solutions, and I'm delighted to be with you all here today. We're going to be talking about, as I said, SharePoint and OneDrive, and if you're new to that or not clear where it fits in with all of Microsoft, what it fits in is inside of Microsoft 365, which is Microsoft's monthly subscription service. Most of you maybe are on it or considering being on it or using it in some way, but maybe not using it for SharePoint OneDrive features. They have different tiers of service and just a bunch of different tools, which is why I really like the Swiss Army knife metaphor. There's just so many different tools you get with the service. Cloud hosted, you can run certain things on premise and on your desktop if you want. And we're here to help. We can help you with security, which is critical, as you'll find out. Regular support, because while there's lots of tools, there's still a lot of things that people want assistance with. You might be wanting to migrate data. So one of the things you might be thinking about through this is how would you migrate some of your data to SharePoint and OneDrive? And or maybe you're thinking about expanding it, because one of the cool things with 365 are some of the ways you can work with the data to automate business processes or to integrate with other solutions. So you might be thinking that might be a place for that. By the way, we're also increasing some usage of Zoom polls, kind of playing around with that and trying to make our presentations a little more fun and interactive. So let's see here, we'll share the results of what we've got here. It's the first time we're doing that. So it looks like the #1 best invention, according to you all folk, is 57% smartphones and tablets. There you go. All right. Let's see. One of the cool things you're going to find out, interestingly, about SharePoint and all of Microsoft 365 is how you can use it pretty much anywhere you go on your smartphone and tablet. So I'm sure Microsoft would agree that that's one of the best inventions. There's different tiers, as I mentioned, of service. You may be in one of these tiers, or it might be named a little bit older, or you might still be like me and sometimes call it Office 365, which is not what it's called anymore. It's now called Microsoft 365. And these are the prices and the typical tiers we have. There were some price adjustments recently. The first ones Microsoft did in, I think, like 10 years on some of their items. So like the Business Basic went up $1 to $6, and the Business Premium went up $2 to $22 a month. But what do all these have in common? They all come with file storage and sharing. They all come with SharePoint and OneDrive, what we're going to talk about today. So if you have one of these tiers, you already have SharePoint and OneDrive. So maybe you're already playing with it, maybe you're already looking at it, but you already are, it's kind of a freebie for you if you don't have it, if you're not using it rather. So now's the opportunity to look at that. People don't always think about the data that's up in Microsoft 365 or any of the cloud services, but you're really putting all your data up there. And what these cloud services, specifically Microsoft, wants you to know, and Google's pretty much the same, and pretty much every large cloud service provider is the same, is who's responsible for their data? You are, not Microsoft, not Google. You are always responsible for, that is their policy. That's what you agree to when you sign up with terms of service. So you are responsible for managing your information and data. You're responsible for managing your devices, like your PCs and your smartphones and tablets. And you are responsible for managing your accounts and identities. So, and you're going to find out that there's a lot of that happening inside of SharePoint, because obviously it's all based on the data. You're putting your documents or considering putting your documents up. And let's see, did you guys, did that poll report? Let's see if I share the results. Did that go in? Let's see. I wonder if I shared the results before. Okay, got a little distracted there. Those are the results. Let's see, stop sharing. Okay. Let's see. So getting back on topic here to Microsoft 365 and SharePoint and OneDrive, the data we're going to be talking about, you're going to see a lot of places where you're going to be thinking about your data and how you're going to access it and who gets to access it. And since you are now responsible for all that, it's a good thing you're going to have the opportunity to learn about that. At Tobin Solutions, we have trademarked the term security strong. That is our trademark, and we believe in being security strong with everything we do. It's a security first mentality, making sure that you consider security in technology, not as a last thing, but as a first thing. And there's some things to consider with SharePoint as we get through here, because there's ways you can share, just like you can share data on your server internally and who you can share that with and control access to it. Now that SharePoint, you know, if you move your files up to SharePoint online through Microsoft 365, you'll have the ability to more easily share documents with people outside your organization if you choose. It's an option. You can disable it across your tenant. You can enable it, but it's something you're going to want to think about. Like, do you want people to be able to easily share documents that might be up there? So there's some places you go in for some settings. You might want to start creating security groups and thinking about, you know, who really should have access to your documents. And really, when you're moving to something like SharePoint, or really any new document management system, it's really an opportunity to maybe rethink all of your file storage and who has access to what in your folder structures and some of that, you know, because some of you may have already done that and you've got everything set up just the way you like. Some of you may see you've got some cruft in there from years and years of server migrations and things being added and people managing it. So now might be an opportunity to do that, as well as tighten up the security on it. We believe in least privilege security as part of our security strong model, which means only the people that have need access to the data should have access to the data. They shouldn't get access to it just because they're in your company. They should get access because they need it. And why you'd want that would be if they ever got hacked, at least only the data they had access to would be hacked, not the entire company's. You're going to want to understand how the recycle bin works for managing deleted files, because if you're putting your files up there, you're now relying on Microsoft to manage the backup and disaster recovery more of your 365 environment. So you're going to understand how those things work. And then lastly, we still recommend the 3-2-1 backup best practices. That is to say, like right now, if you have a traditional file server, you know, we recommend multiple backups of your file server. That initial data you've got, at least some backups on site and at least a backup off site. We recommend the same thing with Microsoft 365. So we'll, you know, there's solutions out there that will back up Microsoft 365 data to a different cloud, so that if Microsoft ever has an issue, it's unavailable or has some other problem, or you need to restore data in a way that is outside of Microsoft's policy, because again, you're in charge of restoring data, or maintaining your data rather, that you will, you might be happy you'll have that extra backup. Microsoft, like if you have a problem, like SharePoint is down, something is down, Microsoft will get that back online for you. They will make sure all of that's working and up and running for you. That's part of their commitment. But when you start to get into some of the individual file management and granular file restores and individual little things like that, that's where it can get tougher and where you might want one of these outside backup services. They have a solution for it, but after a while it expires and then you'll need a different solution. So a lot of you might already be in this kind of world, and so just presence, where you're at and what we look at in terms of thinking about the migration. So you've got your traditional file server in Windows Explorer, right? You might have your S drive or your P drive or your whatever drive is your shared company drive. You may have a couple company drives. And then you may have your own private drive, like your U drive or something like a W drive or something like that, that's only your drive that you see. And you typically have them organized into these folders and all that, and use your Windows Explorer, and you go to your drive and you drill into the folders and you create new folders. And you all know how to do that pretty well. And you're very familiar with it. And you have been doing it for, in many cases, years and years and years, and you have lots of muscle memory around this. So sometimes this is one of the challenges of moving to something like SharePoint, is the relearning. So, anything we're doing in terms of a migration, we're going to want to make sure and to really include training, change management, like showing people how this is going to work, getting people involved along the way. So it's not kind of a surprise if things are moved around and changed, and that people have the training and such that they need, because there's a lot of muscle memory around this, really. So don't underestimate the power of resistance that'll provide if you just want to take advantage of the SharePoint OneDrive. So what is SharePoint? SharePoint fundamentally is a content management system that Microsoft provides. What do I mean by a content management system? Many of you have heard of websites based on WordPress, or a website based on Drupal, or one of those kinds of things. Those are content management systems. Those are things that let you set up web pages. Those are things that let you create public-facing websites. You can even create internal WordPress sites. And in those WordPress sites, you can add, calendars and other documents. There's little widgets you can add in and all that. And SharePoint's no different. It's Microsoft's content management system. That's really, really how it started. And a lot of people still use it that way. They'll use it for their intranet site, kind of the, kind of the 90s term or the early 2000s term, right? When people talk about having an intranet, like they like the idea of the web, and they're like, how do I get a website inside my company where I can have everything accessed through a web browser and give them access to pictures, documents, calendars, contact lists, links to other things, all of that, that's SharePoint. And so with your Microsoft 365 subscription, you get SharePoint, and you get what's called a default SharePoint team site that is already created for you. It may look something similar to this. It's got some default things set up for it. You can customize it, and you can create your whole own SharePoint site. And it's mobile friendly. So even you can see it from your phone, from your tablet. But it's all private if you want. I don't think they even have an option anymore to make your SharePoint sites public. They used to have that as an option. They still might, but I think it's mainly meant to be an internal thing. So from your phone or tablet, you would log into your Microsoft using the SharePoint app. You'd log in from your phone using your Microsoft 365 credentials, and you would see this same experience, but tailored for your phone and for your tablet. So that's pretty cool, right? We're trying to share information these days, right? What's happening in the company? What's happening with, people are working remotely, right? People are working from home, people are mobile, people are in and out of the office, who knows, it's vacation time, but people never really quite take a vacation these days. They check in on things. So the more mobile information you've got, to make it easy, get people what they need quickly, you can do that with SharePoint. So you can do a lot of these things. So SharePoint is all of that. And we're going to focus on one very specific element of SharePoint today, which is the document piece. Because remember what I said is SharePoint has all these widgets and things you can plug in, like photos and calendars and links and things like that. One of the other things you can plug into SharePoint is documents. And so that's what we're going to talk about. And the way SharePoint stores those, their widget is called a document library. So inside of SharePoint, inside of every SharePoint site, you have a document library that's created for you automatically. And sometimes it's called shared drives, or it might be called document. or shared or something like that, but that's like your shared drive. This is where, like, if you have on your server right now and you've got your S drive where you share everything, this document library would kind of be like your S drive where you could potentially move everything. So it's where you're going to put your files and folders. You can have multiple document libraries, and that's kind of handy. So if you're thinking about maybe reorganizing documents a bit, based on security, based on who needs to them, you might create a different library, create a marketing library inside of SharePoint, or a finance and admin library, or a operations library, and just give people the access to what they need. And so that's a handy thing and a great use of those libraries. So what you're going to do is you're going to have those libraries, and there's a couple different ways you can do this. But fundamentally, these libraries, now instead of seeing them as like an S drive through Windows Explorer, you'll now see them through a web browser. So if you open up a web browser and you browse to office.com and go to your SharePoint site, or one thing that's nice about SharePoint is all of these things become links. So you can create a favorite to your SharePoint site, and to the document library. So you can see it's got documents listed here in the middle. That's what's selected. You can see documents, and what do you see? Something that looks similar to a Windows Explorer, right? You can see folders, and you can see files, and you can see dates and who modified them, and it's similar, right? It's kind of that look and feel. And in here, you can, you don't have to use folders, but you can. And so you're using the web browsers to access this, but there's other ways to get access to these documents, not through a web browser, because some people don't like the web browser experience, or they want some other ways to get at the documents that are a little more familiar, or they need to get access to the documents because of the way the application that integrates with their documents needs to see it as a file on their machine and not as something in a web browser. So some things to consider as you're kind of planning out what this would look like. So that's kind of SharePoint overall. And then we talked about specifically the document libraries inside of SharePoint sites. Now, what's OneDrive? And this is where Microsoft doesn't do themselves any service here. They've got a lot of kind of crossover names with OneDrive. But fundamentally, you also get something called OneDrive for Business. And I call that like a special document library. The document libraries that are under those team sites, that is under, there's like a SharePoint team site. Under that, there's lots of different widgets. One of them is which a document library. With OneDrive for Business, there's just the special document library. There's no other widgets or anything like that as part of this. And really, this is kind of the design maybe for your private files. These are for the things you wouldn't put on your shared drive, or if you already have a private drive that you use, like your My Documents or your U Drive or something like that, those would be maybe where you put those documents. But now they're up in Microsoft, they're up in the cloud, and while you can see them locally, you can now see them from your phone. You can see them from your tablet, you can see them from your laptop, anywhere you want. They're easier to share if you want. You don't have to share them from here, but you can. Yeah, you've got full mobility around that. So that's something that a lot of people really like. And one of the things that's really nice about SharePoint and OneDrive that you might have been a limitation for you now, or something that has been kind of a pokey kind of sore point, is remote access to your server. Maybe you're getting it right now through like a VPN or something like that. With OneDrive and SharePoint, you won't need a VPN to access your documents anymore. You'll just need the proper application and your Microsoft 365 credentials, and you'll be able to go from that smartphone or tablet without a VPN, but securely. So where should the documents go? This is more of a policy than a hard and fast rule. I'd say this is more of a best practice than a must practice, but really, the SharePoint document libraries, that's when that's like your common drives, your team projects, your department, your company-wide stuff, things you're going to want to share with a wider scope of people. And then use OneDrive for Business when it's really private to you, or you're only going to kind of do sparingly share things. And the reason I say sparingly is because, when you start to get a lot of permissions on things in different places, it can get challenging. And then Yeah. So we recommend if you need to share with multiple people, get it into a document library and have that document library shared with those multiple people, and then put it there, and then you'll all have access to it. We consider that a best practice. So these are some things you're going to get that you don't necessarily get now with having files stored on your current server. Joyce, you have a question about administrative access. Administrators can get access to anything in the system. Yep. You can set that up. I think that answers your question. Yeah. So you can get an administrator and get another OneDrive. So that's one other nice thing you can do with it. Another thing you can do once things are in document libraries, you're welcome, is that you can't do now is co-authoring. What is co-authoring? That is Microsoft's term for multiple people being in an Office document at the same time. So what happens now when you go to your shared drive and you open up the budget spreadsheet and someone else is in it, you get the, it's read only. Now, maybe that's okay because you want to know anyone to be changing it at the moment. You want them to do that, possibly. But most of the time, it's really a frustration, especially when they've gone for the day and it's open on their desktop and you're trying to get some work done. It's really usually more of an irritation. When things are stored in SharePoint or even in OneDrive, you can do what's called co-authoring, meaning multiple people can open those documents at the same time. And it'll actually show you in the document who's in it and where they're at, and you can actually be editing, and it's really cool. It's really great. We use it a lot. That shows up like when we're getting ready for our leadership team meeting, and everyone's, the half hour before putting their notes into our agenda and our scorecard, and we don't have to wait for anybody to get out. We can just go in and start putting it all in. Another thing you get is automatic versioning of documents. So you are very familiar maybe now with versioning, because you probably do it now where you copy a document, you say copy and copy 1 and copy 2, and you keep kind of creating your own versions, or you create folders with dates, or you rename the document with a date at the end and then create a new copy and things like that. And you kind of have like a manual versioning method. When things are stored in SharePoint, you actually have automatic versioning, meaning you can go back to a document and right click on it and say, go to versions, and you can find out what that document looked like a month ago, 2 months ago. You can bring it up, you can restore it, you can compare it to the current version. It's cool. So you have all that happening for you. So you don't have to do that manual copy thing. Sometimes there's a time to do that, but a lot of times it's more just you're trying to keep those old versions for reference or something like that. You can lock down versions and say, what's the current version while you're working on drafts. I mean, there's some neat things you can do with it. Also, when things are in document libraries, you get new options to filter and view those documents to be able to find things. You have new options for notifications, right? How do you know now when the budget spreadsheet's been updated? You probably get a copy of it in your email, or you get an email from somebody telling you the budget spreadsheet's updated. Now you could actually subscribe to the budget spreadsheet notifications and say, hey, anytime someone changes this, give me an updated email. Or when someone adds a file to this folder, get me an updated email or something. Which you can also do workflow with document libraries. So maybe you have an approval process where you put documents in, and before they become, maybe someone's writing up a policy and someone else needs to approve the policy. You can actually set it up where it's a workflow. That's actually not a great example. It doesn't happen that often. Let's talk about like something that maybe happens a lot, like sending out a quote, right? Maybe someone puts together the quote and then another person approves and sends the quote with, maybe you do that with like a Word doc or a spreadsheet or something as your quote. You could actually do a workflow that says, after one person says it and they approve it, it now goes to the next person automatically for approval, and they can mark it as ready to go and send it out. Once things are up in document libraries, remember I was showing you that web browser view of it before. That doesn't always work for everybody. Some people want to be able to have them down on their local C drive or on their phone or tablet because they're going to be offline for some reason, or because they want to be able to see them through Internet Explorer or through Windows Explorer rather, but see it on their C drive. Or they're used to something like Dropbox where they sync files down. So with the OneDrive sync client, and here's where it's like really badly named. Remember I was saying it's kind of like a separate thing that's really meant more for your personal stuff inside of that? Well, it's the same name for the app that also syncs down the document libraries from SharePoint. So you'll still be seeing OneDrive locally, but when you go to sync a OneDrive folder, like if I go back to this window, if you see right above the modified straight up here on the bar, it says sync. If you've got this enabled and you have the proper permissions, you click on sync, it's going to pop up OneDrive and it's going to create a little option to either bring those files down as full copies or create a local reference to them so that you can get at them from your Windows Explorer. There's the recycle bin automatically, and I think it's 90 days, I think is what the recycle bin is, which is why you might want to have backups after that, because once something gets deleted after those 90 days, it might be gone. So I think that's the thing. I have to verify that. It's not indefinite. There's other ways to search beyond name, and I'll talk about that, and that's by like adding fields to documents. Here's an example of what that co-authoring looks like. So here you can see they're in the document at the same time. And this works either through a web browser. So someone could be opening up the document through a web browser because there's a whole web version of like, say, Word. But even if you've got the full desktop version of Word, you can also do the same thing regardless. You can watch changes in real time. You can see a little where they are in the file. That's, like I said, that's what our executive team, leadership team meeting looks like as we're going into our scorecard before our meeting. Everyone's in, you can see people jumping around, getting their information in before our meeting. Talking about that versioning before. So automatically you get those versions here, and you can create your own version numbering if you want. It's got the automatic date when they were modified by, any comments you have, but if you right click on it, you can view, restore, or even delete an old version. And so it does it automatically. And like I said, you can go back and easily compare documents and that. So this does this automatically for you. So that's pretty handy. So you don't necessarily have to do that save as a copy kind of a thing. You can if you want. You can also use the version history that is built in. A little bit more about that OneDrive application. Like I said, it's kind of a confusing name. There are applications for Windows, Mac, iPhones, Android apps. That OneDrive app, that is that app that will allow you to take your device at a device level and kind of connect it up to Microsoft SharePoint, your documents up there. And when I say at a device level, I mean because that's where it will sync the files down. So there's that program that'll manage copying files down and sending files back up, and things like that. So you can do your OneDrive files, you can sync those document libraries, and you can sync your special folders. So some people will use OneDrive, and inside of their OneDrive app, they'll go to like their My Documents, and they'll sync that up and that'll sync that up to OneDrive for them automatically, or what's on your desktop. So a little bit more about Microsoft 365 via the web browser. So if you go to office.com from a web browser, office.com, make sure you go to office.com, not some fake website that might be something similar, but office.com, you'll see all of your Microsoft 365 environment and what's available via a web browser. And so that can be handy, right? You may be somewhere, this is where you can get access to documents where you may not be in your office and maybe not have access to that VPN. Maybe it's you're at your in-laws for the holiday and you need to quick get into a document. You trust their computer enough to log in through a web browser. You can open up a web browser, log in go to office.com, put in your Microsoft credentials, and see your documents there. See your calendar, see your contacts. All of those things are favorites you can do. So you can see all of your documents from any web browser. Like I said, it's got that. You can see your bookmarks. If you want to bookmark a document, you can do that. You've got your search box that'll search the current documents area here. You can see all your document libraries listed down here. So in this case, there's just the one documents library listed here. But if you had a document library for HR, for finance and admin, you could put each one down here and then put a little link on the side. So when they click on it, they can go in and see those documents. You can manually upload documents. So people might be wondering, how do I get my documents up here? There's a couple different ways. One of them is to click this upload, and you can select different ways to do that. That's one easy way. If you've got lots and lots of documents, there's better tools for it. So, you know, your mileage may vary on how this works in terms of how big the files are, how many of the files are, how much time it takes, and things like that. So you could definitely upload a few documents and you want to play with it. But if you're going to migrate your whole server, we recommend a conversation with us first. You can see your documents here. So again, you can see your folders and any files that are there. And you can see this filters views. So right now I'm showing all documents. So it's really easy to go in and click there. And there you can use a little filter box, and you can do the you know, you can filter by name, you can filter by modified date, you can filter by a lot of things in there to make it really easy to have a quick view. And then once you have that filter, you can save that as a view if you want, because you can save views. You can create your own views that are unique to you or unique to other people. And then you can even bookmark those views, so it's really easy to get to. And then it's kind of tiny, kind of a cool little feature here, but like, what is this? So I'm seeing these documents and it's like, okay, Jeremy, I get you got the name, right? File and folder name, you got the date, who did it. What is this add column all about? Well, because you've now got these documents stored inside of SharePoint, and inside of that SharePoint document library widget is where those documents get stored, really get stored as a list of documents. And these lists have columns, and the columns have a column called name and a column called modified and a column called modified by, and you can create your own columns. So you click there and you can go to any one of your documents and you can create a new column. Let's say you call this column job number or client number or invoice number or whatever you want to put in there. And you can create multiple columns. You can say what that is. It can be a line of text you can type in. You can create that type field, that third box down where it says type. There's little things you can create, a little drop down list of like, what type of document is this? Maybe you have a column called type and your types are proposal, training, and HR. I don't know, whatever you put in there, right, for different document types. So you could actually start to, instead of putting things in the document name to describe it, which you can also add some columns. But then once you've got those columns defined, now it's really super easy to edit, sort, and filter by those. So you can quickly sort them by job number, by job name. If you've got a bunch of documents all tied to a job number, and you go in and create that column called job number, you can just filter and just say, show me all the items with job number XYZ or whatever it is. ABC 1, 2, 3. And there it'll be. So it's very cool. And we use this. So one of the ways at Tobin we use this is we scan some of our documents. We scan them into the system. We put them up here for our accounts payable, you know, the invoices we pay and things like that. And we scan some of those documents in, and then we put the invoice number and the and such reference number in a column, so it's really easy to find them. So that's a cool feature. Sue's asking, how do we start the new columns? You just, if you have permissions to go in, you just go in and put one in. If you have permissions to create those things in the site. So when you're inside of that document library, that's where you'd create it. And if you want to look at that outside of this, let us know. A lot of you are starting to use Microsoft Teams. If you don't see that as an option, you may not have permissions to do it, or you may be in somewhere else. Otherwise, it normally should be there. A lot of you are starting to use Microsoft Teams, which is cool, right? You're starting to do voice and video conferencing. Maybe you're doing chats back and forth. Maybe you've even started to create some additional teams, like here at Tobin, we've got our leadership team and our Team Tobin team and our marketing team. And anytime you create a team, Microsoft creates a structure for you to support the information on that team. And one of the structures Microsoft creates is a tab called Files. You can see Files has a little blue bar or a purple bar under it that's got that selected. So I'm in the marketing team, and I'm in this general channel. So you can see I'm in the general channel here, and files are selected, and you can see files there. New, upload, all of that. Teams does not natively store any documents. All of these documents you're seeing are actually being stored in SharePoint, and it does it for you automatically. So some of you may already be using documents in Teams and you're already using SharePoint. You didn't even know you were using SharePoint. You can actually store other kinds of documents in Teams as well from other sources, but natively it's Microsoft SharePoint, which is why when you go in here, you can create documents inside of Teams, right? You can do new and upload and sync and those kinds of things. But look at that, you've even got, whoops, clicked actually to click. You've got open in SharePoint. So if you were to go into Teams and you were in that team and on the general tab and you clicked open in SharePoint, it would actually open up your web browser and bring you right to where it is in SharePoint. But the co-authoring, all of that stuff you do, you want to chat about documents in Teams, because now you can actually chat about documents in Teams. When you chat, it's easier. You don't have to email documents back and forth. It's really cool. You just chat about it in Teams and the documents are right there, and you have to sit there and worry about whether you got the current document or not. But it's only in SharePoint is where these documents actually live. So this is kind of I want you to really get this, because sometimes people get a little stuck around this. They're like, where are my documents again? I'm in Teams or am I in SharePoint? Your documents, you might be seeing them from Teams, but they actually exist in SharePoint. Another place you might see your documents from besides a web browser is strictly right within Microsoft Office. With Microsoft Office, you're used to, using Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and you're used to going to your S drive, your U drive or whatever, and opening them up. What they've done now with Microsoft Office is Microsoft Office can now read and write directly to a SharePoint document library. So if you're in Microsoft Office and you go to open a new document or save a copy of a document or whatever, you're going to see a box that looks something like this. Let's take a look here and see what's in the red box. Notice how you're not seeing the traditional file and folder structure. First thing you're seeing is it says recent. So these are the recent places I've been. You're seeing Tobin Solutions, Inc. When you see that, you will probably see, if you have Microsoft 365, you will see your company name there, because that's what should be there. Meaning you're looking at these things exist inside of your Microsoft 365 tenant. And there's two sources listed for me here. There's my OneDrive. So that's my OneDrive. It's OneDrive, but at Tobin Solutions. So that's my personal jeremy.cherney@tobinsolutions.com OneDrive. So I could save and read and write a document directly into my OneDrive from here. If I opened it and saw the same kind of a dialogue, I'd be able to do that same kind of thing, drill down on the right side here, drill into the files and folders, name things, create a new folder, do all that stuff. That's my OneDrive. If I click Sites, that's going to show you all of your SharePoint sites. So you may have, remember I talked about SharePoint and you have a site, that team site. You can have multiple team sites and multiple kinds of different sites for different purposes inside of SharePoint. Like you might have your overall company team site that you use, for documents, or maybe you're taking advantage of some of those other kind of intranet features I was talking about, like the calendar and links and news of the day and things like that. You might create another site for a specific department or a specific project, in which case it's a separate site that's going to have its own separate document library. So when you actually click on sites, you'll then be able to see all the different sites and then browse through those as a picker as well. If you've got a personal OneDrive, because I also have a personal OneDrive account, you will see that listed here. And then you will see the other locations, PC, browsing, see your C drive, your S drive, things like that. And you can create favorites for all of that. So, but this is very tight integration that used to not exist. And it was really kind of a challenge to use SharePoint outside of a web browser. Now it's really easy. It's really, really easy. And what's really cool is if you have a laptop at home, or you have a laptop that you use and you have Microsoft 365 and you've got the full desktop version of Microsoft 365, Microsoft Office 365 installed for Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all you have to do is just open up your computer, connect to the internet, open up Word, and browse to your Word documents. Nifty. No VPN to mess around with, no remote desktop. Now, if you have applications you need to run, there might be other reasons you use those, but if you just want to get into documents, you can do this. And you can do the same thing from your iPhone, Android phone, all that. One of the things we talked about before is that you can share documents outside your organization or internally. Now, how do you share documents now? Joyce is asking if home internet is down. That's a good question. Yeah, if home internet is down and your documents, this is a great point, Joyce. This really fits with the whole. You should be my my security question shill in the audience. If the internet's down and your documents only exist in the cloud, then you will not have access to those documents from your home internet. It's plain and simple. Now, if you've used OneDrive to sync some of those files down to your local system, and you can sync documents and you can sync lots of documents, but if you've got like a million documents does not sync well. So you have to kind of see what you might need. But you can do that. But because the other aspect of this is if your home internet is down, maybe you have your smartphone and you can turn that into a hotspot if you know how to do that. Then you can tether your computer to your phone and you're back in business. But yeah, if you don't have the documents local and you don't have internet in some way, you will not have access to those documents. But like I said, if you have an iPad or an iPhone and you want to get at your documents and maybe you don't know even what I'm talking about when it comes to tethering and all that, again, it might be a tiny experience on your phone, but you can open those documents right on your phone if they're up in SharePoint. You can read them, copy and paste them, share them, email them, do all that. Great question, because yeah, that's a critical part of this. Right now, if you're in the office and your internet's down, you may have a lot of headaches, but you can probably still work on your internal documents. If you're in the office and your internet goes down and everything's up in SharePoint, you're going to have some things you want to think about. Maybe you want to have a secondary internet connection, things like that, because the internet takes on an even greater prominence in your security needs. But most people get security is pretty critical for so many other reasons these days. Anyway, so what are you going to do once you got the internet? You want to share these documents. So now how do you share them now? You email them, things like that. How else do you mail them? You might send a link to like your P drive or S drive, or who knows what you might do it. A lot of times you know how to share things now. Maybe you're one of the sports parent for your kids, or you're doing something in Scouts or whatever it is, and you maybe use Google Drive or all those things, and you know how to share Google documents, and you get Google documents shared with you. A lot of people get that in their home world. Same kind of concept here. You can share them internally as well as externally, but just a quick way to make a link, because remember, now once things are in SharePoint, everything's a link. So it's really easy to share things. You can just click the share. You can type in their email address. It'll automatically share it internally. If you want to do an external email address, you can put that in there. And if you've got external sharing available, what they'll get is they'll get a link to the original document. So again, you want to look, is that something you want to do or not? You can also send a read-only link. So when you share something, you might say to a client, here's a link to the contract, but it's a read-only link. That might be useful. Or maybe you don't want to send a link. You actually want to send at the bottom where it says Outlook or copy link. You can copy the link and paste that into like a Teams chat if you want to quickly show somebody where a document is. Or you might use Outlook, and there there'll be an option to actually send it as a Word, or as a, as a regular attachment or as a PDF. So you can share documents that way. So workflow and automation. There's some things that you can do now that you couldn't easily do before, that you can do now, that you have things in SharePoint, in a cloud-based solution that's kind of a new kind of a file system for you. Some of the things you can do are approval workflows. We talked a bit about that before. Maybe you've got like a 2 or 3 step process before a document gets somewhere. Someone starts it, someone approves it, and then it goes back to the other person, and then they send it. Great. You can actually set that up inside of SharePoint. So now you start to create the possibility of automation, automating those business processes that you've got. Maybe you don't have the business processes automated yet. Maybe you haven't even got the business processes documented. Maybe you're like, Jeremy, what are you even talking about a business process around some of these things? That'd be a good conversation to look at, because anywhere you've got information flowing in your organization, anywhere you've got some kind of inputs and outputs and some results you're expecting, you've got those business processes, and a lot of times those touch documents, right? They're touching those Word, Excel, PowerPoint kind of things. And so if you can automate that, if you can track that, if you can audit that, if you can get alerts on things, that'll a way of reducing those fires, ways of reducing the rework, ways of reducing, having to send out those soothing gift cards to clients because, you messed up on something, right? We've all been there. We've all done that. You can't be in business for any length of time and not mess up once in a while. You're only human. You can make it right, because I know you're all good people, but are there things you can put in place to try and reduce the amount of those errors? Make it a little less human-y in the process, make it a little more automated, because people forget. People are human. Experts forget. And even integration. So there's, when you've got some things in like what's an example of something? You can have, how many of y'all get emails from clients, and then someone goes in and takes that email, opens it up, and then copies that email to a folder on the network somewhere, or takes the attachment off of the email and copies it to a folder somewhere? You can actually automate that now that things would be in Microsoft 365 and SharePoint, because there's some tools like something like Power Automate, where you can have it read incoming emails from a specific email address, take off the attachments, and store it to a document library. I think that's pretty cool. So there's some things you can start to do in there. Some of you want to go to SharePoint, but you're like, Jeremy, my people will not give up their S drive. I will have a riot on my hands if they do this. They will leave. I can't afford to have good people leave right now. They'll go insane. And really, we do hear that sometimes, because people have a lot of muscle memory. And really, if we really look at ourselves, we don't really like change that much. So, but we also sometimes there's value in change. So here's the both and. The both and is you can move all of your documents to SharePoint and OneDrive. And then you can use a third-party tool called Z Drive, which will give you back your P drive, S drive, U drive, W drive, whatever you called it. And it'll let you use it just like you used it before through Windows Explorer and doing all of that. but all the documents are stored up in SharePoint. And you can use them either way. You can go through the web browser, you can go through the SharePoint thing, or you can use the Z Drive app. It's all, or Teams, it's all the same data. This just gives you another way to look at it. It's an extra cost, but for some people, it's well worth the price because they don't have to invest in training as much. Like there's not a lot of training, because for them, it's like, oh, what happened? Oh, my P drive is still my P drive. My S drive is still my S drive over the weekend. Okay. So, if you've got some people that, or maybe you are looking to do a two-step migration, maybe you're like, hey, I want to get to SharePoint because I want to get rid of my server. I want to move to the cloud, but I'm not ready to make this change. So you might start with getting things to SharePoint using Z Drive, and then in a year or two, doing the training later and, you know, having people use SharePoint without Z Drive. So you've learned a lot today about what it can and can't do. You've seen some examples of and heard some examples of where it can be. I was looking at something here. I have polls. Amanda, I wasn't sure if we had another poll. Amanda's online assisting today. Oh, there's a poll here. So good. So I'm gonna put this poll up here, or I think it already is up there for you guys. Are you guys seeing that automatically? Hopefully. So what does this look like? Because again, people do not like change. Most IT projects fail because people didn't get adequate time to learn what was happening, or they weren't part of the decision, or they put something in place that just wasn't going to work for them, or they put something in place thinking they could do it the same old way, thinking it's just a new house but the same mess, and that doesn't work. So we recommend proceeding a little bit with caution. You know, get together, get a couple people, your power users, your people that got a little time to play along, and you can identify that proof of concept team, like who's going to be in there. Review and discuss what's possible. So you might want to have them go through this webinar or the slide deck, or maybe bring us in for a conversation around this. Think about what your goals are. You know, what does this look like? Definitely want to include security. We want to help you with change management. This is the kind of thing, like if you move things to the cloud and you're not using something like Z Drive, it's going to look different. And we want people to know what that looks like and know when it's coming. You don't want them just to wake up one day and suddenly all their files are not where they thought. Or you gave them a half hour of training and thought, okay, that's good enough. Now, well, they're going to throw you in the deep end. I'm telling you, I've been doing this for a very long time. Tobin's been in business for 25 years, and I was doing this years before that. Projects fail because people rush at this stage. So don't underestimate a few good emails and a team pizza lunch to really give people the training they need and the awareness of what's happening. Get that test plan together so people can know if this is going to work or not. Like you might have applications that integrate. Like Robin just asked, what if you have files and they have links to them? Are they going to break when they move to the cloud? Yeah. If those links are to, like, if you have all your files stored on an S drive and then you move those files to the cloud and you don't have an S drive anymore, those links are going to fail. So you might have to do a project to, do a massive search and replace on those, to replace those links with the links to the SharePoint links. Or you move to the cloud, but then you use that Z drive. Then if you have a link to an S drive and you use that Z drive, you can create an S drive with Z drive. This is called Z drive, is the name of the program. You can create an S drive with Z drive and your links will work. So like I said, there's usually ways around it. It's an additional cost, but you'll be part of the way there. Let's see. So you want to get that test plan though. Like you may not have known that. Like that's a good question Robin asked, but you may not have thought about those links to files, and then you get it up there and then you didn't test it out and then you found out you had a problem. So we want to know ahead of time what we're going to run into. We want to make sure you're looking at those out of the box experiences for SharePoint and OneDrive and what they look like, and just make sure they're working as designed. We want to start migrating. Ultimately, if you choose to move forward with it, we'll migrate the documents, or you migrate the documents. And then you want to get that basic orientation and training. You want to create that troubleshooting and follow-up environment for questions. Don't leave your people hanging. You will have a revolt on your hands. I'm telling you, we've seen it over and over again, and you hear the war stories, and it's just not fun. It's just not fun. We've all been in that in one link or another, right? Something's changing, and we could roll with it if we knew about it and had some training. We may not like it, but at least we'd feel a little more prepared. Give us a chance to get used to the new normal. And then review the results and decision point. I kind of jumped out of order there, but talking about kind of what it would look like it was fully implemented, but even in a small pilot project, maybe you just pick your HR documents. That's sometimes a good place to go, because you want those HR documents. Like, what do you do on a snow day? It's June now. We don't have to worry about snow days at the moment, although it was getting a little dicey there in May, whether we were going to have some snow days in June. Maybe we already did. I think maybe we did in the beginning of June, didn't we? Anyway, what's the snow day policy? They could actually have that on SharePoint. So that might be a good concept project to do. Different ways about it. So we recommend going through. There is a process, and we can help you with this, walk you through what it looks like. But it's doable. We've helped many clients get to SharePoint and been very happy there, get rid of their on-premise servers. Looking at the poll here, let's see. End the poll, and we'll share the results. So let's see what people are looking forward to getting out of maybe a possibility of a proof of concept. Document versions, yeah. Adding in new information, that's cool. Yeah, new document libraries. Workflow, isn't that interesting? Yeah. So there's some cool possibilities there. Really, there's something for everyone there. And we encourage you to try it out. You've got it, as I showed you before. Thanks for being here today to hear about it. You're going to get a link later on for the survey, and you complete that, you'll get a copy of the slide deck and a link to the video on this, and we encourage you to look at it and consider it. If you've already started with SharePoint and you want us to, sometimes it's to kind of go in and kind of clean up what's there, because you may have started a long time ago and hadn't thought about some of these things, we can help there too. If you'd like us to come and talk about this in your organization, if you want to be that champion to talk more about what it would look like and how it can be done in a way that isn't completely disruptive to everyday life, let us know. Or if you'd like us to talk about any other topics around this or Microsoft 365 or security, or you just want to say hi, feel free to reach out and let us know.